My name is Colleen Dilbeck, and this took place in Enterprise, Alabama. And I first of all met my ex-husband, who is now ex-husband. We are divorced since 2007. We met in Panama City Beach, Florida. We worked together. He was the manager. I was, we worked at a resort. So when we met, we dated here and there. We dated from 1992 until we got married in 1998. There were not any signs of what I am dealing with now, but at that time I didn't know to look for that. Sexual abuse for children. He didn't seem like he, I just didn't see any signs like that. But he was an alcoholic, I guess, towards the end. I didn't realize that either. A lot of things I realized after we were married more than I did when we were dating, obviously. And then we moved to Enterprise, Alabama from Panama City. And then things started to get really weird. He was on pornography every night, and I didn't know that because I didn't have a computer at my house. He was living in Enterprise. I was living in Panama City Beach before the marriage, and even after that, actually for about 3 months. And I worked in Panama City as a travel agent. So he would sit and be on not child pornography, regular pornography, all night. It was like a business or something. He was on there all night long. And it was just a very rude awakening for me, because that's all he did. And I would never, just things were just not normal, and he would drink all the time, and things became different, during our marriage. But it only got worse. It got worse. We were only married 5 years. In 2006, actually 2003, I had already started to pre-plan to have a separation because of the bad, incompatible marriage it was. And then in 2003, I got pregnant. So I thought, well, this is supposed to be, I guess. So I stayed with him and had my daughter Shelby at April 11, 2003. I had a son at that time. He was, when we got married, he was in 2nd grade. He is now 23 years old. And so he was from a previous marriage, which his dad had passed away. So then 2006, we were separated in February of 2006. And it was mutual agreement. We were fine with it. Everything, we were on good terms and everything. And it was just a big relief off my shoulders. And so after that, all of a sudden, my daughter's going to her visitations. She's 3 years old, and she's going to visitations, and she's screaming at every exchange. It doesn't matter if it was with his mother or her or him. It didn't matter. I mean, I wish she'd just grab me and hold me and scream, and I'm clinging to me, and I still didn't get it. I still didn't understand it. There were a lot of signs during our marriage that now I know, and I live with a lot of guilt because of that. It's just very, very hard. Now I know. It was happening in the house before we left, sexual abuse with my daughter, before we were separated. I know that now because of the signs and the baths that he'd give, and she'd scream, and I'd get up in the night. She never slept through the night, it seemed. I would wake up because I hear her crying, and then I see him walking out of the room. I mean, there's just so many things that I still didn't get it. It's just you don't expect that. It was the last thing you expect, I was still at that point hoping it was somebody else, and not him. But she kept saying, later on after, I took her to a counselor because I didn't know what to think. And I was so scared to find out it was him, actually, to be honest. So when I took her, she was being seen and for a while, and then her dad actually was out of town during the first initial visits with this counselor. So while he was out of town, she continued to see the counselor and stuff, and so things were fine. They thought, oh, good, things are okay, she's not disclosing, and everything's, maybe I'm just, I don't know what it was. Well, then he comes back from working after about 2 months, and he gets his visitations back, and all of a sudden she's telling me the cat's licking her, and by the, like, her daddy does something like the cat licks her on her feet, but then she points to her crotch, things like that. I was getting all kinds of mixed messages. And her behavior, she'd take her doll's arm and put it in and out of her mouth, like she was showing me what was happening, and and then the counselor, I guess she said the fear of her the fear of her father and her behavior immediately started up again. So, and the counselor reported this to DHR, which is Department of Human Resources, which was Coffee County Department of Human Resources in Enterprise, and reported sexual abuse. So then Tina Lewis was the DHR social worker, and she then directed me to take her to the forensic exam in Flowers Hospital. And the Flowers Hospital report is right here, and Carol Dean's report is right here. I have all of that in this. Here's Carol Dean's, all of her future testimony in court, and her, her trying to get the court not to give her visitations, reinstate visitations. This is later on. And then the Start Saying nurse, which is the examiner, nurse examiner. I have her report here as well, and we were in there getting her exam, and Shelby was 3 at the time, and she was on the table being examined, and the nurse had a hard time getting her to do an exam on the rear end. I don't know how else to say it. And then, but she would scream, and that ended everything. But long story short, she had a transection at 12 o'clock, which was, it went along with what the story was that I was telling her. But it was a healed tear, and it wasn't a fresh tear because it was 14 days after her visitation with her father. So that, I have read and researched that, and from what the doctors told me, that could have healed by then. So, and then Shelby added to that. During the exam, Shelby said she was doing something, helping the doctor or the nurse. And I said, how do you know how to do that? She was helping them, look at her. And she says, Daddy showed me. And that's in the documentation. So then visitations were stopped. They were suspended at that time. He had an attorney that, he changed another attorney. Now at this point, he has 2 attorneys within 3 or 4 months. So there was an investigator, his name is Hal Cox. He was assigned to the case in the beginning. He was also running for sheriff in Dale County, which is Ozark, at the sheriff's office, because my ex-husband resides in Dale County, I reside in Enterprise, Coffee County. So that makes it 2 different cases. The child abuse was in Dale County and the divorce is in Coffee County. So the Dale County District Attorney, Kirk Adams, I still hadn't connected with him yet. But Hal Cox, I found a pair of bathing suit bottoms that had 2 drops of blood, looked like blood on them. And so I gave them to Hal Cox, and he was taking them into the forensic science lab. The bathing suit bottoms were supposedly given to the forensic science lab in Montgomery, Alabama, and to give as evidence to be tested. And according to Hal Cox, the investigator. And then this is July 14th, 2006, when all this took place. Later on in August 2006, Hal Cox did not, he dropped the case because he ended up leaving the sheriff's office and went to the police department because he was running for sheriff and he did not win the election. At that point, nobody took the case. The case just sat there and nobody investigated it. And the law enforcement had never even spoken to the people that reported the abuse. The district attorney never spoke to them. I didn't report the abuse. The counselors did. There was Carol Dean, and then there was I start saying nurse, and her name is Cindy Woodham from Flowers Hospital. And they never questioned them, never interviewed them about why they even reported the abuse. At that point, I was advised by Hal Cox to contact Kirk Adams, which is the district attorney of Dale County. And at that point, he didn't respond to me because there was supposed to be a grand jury that was meeting, a secret indictment, which was around September 23rd or so, or 22nd of 2006. I showed up at that without speaking to Kirk Adams, and nothing was even mentioned about abuse. I wasn't allowed to bring up the abuse. It was just very, very odd. They didn't indict him, and anybody can be indicted. They didn't indict him. They had no intentions of indicting him, of doing anything. Or they would have spoken to the professionals, and they would have also sent the bathing suit bottoms into the forensic science lab, which never did happen. They didn't send that in until three months later. So they had a grand jury, a secret indictment, without even sending the evidence into the forensic science lab. So that was very interesting. I knew at that point there was never going to be an investigation. Something was really wrong and my daughter was not going to be protected. And I was scared to death for her. So I called the Attorney General's office and asked them for their advice. What do I do? Because they will not investigate. And they refused to investigate at that point. And they said, we will look into the matter. And that's all I got. I got a response from them saying that they would look into it. So then at that point, DHR indicated abuse not found. Not indicated. So then my ex, in November of 2006, wanted custody. That's when custody became an issue. And at that point, he got another attorney. His name was Joseph Sawyer from Enterprise, Alabama. And since that point forward, everything made no sense at all. There was, laws weren't being followed. Legal abuse began happening to me. The list went on and on. I didn't understand what was happening to me, why nobody was protecting Shelby, my daughter, and why I was being fallen prey to the court system, fallen prey to the corruption. At that point, we had a visitation hearing to be reinstated for visitations. Carol Dean, this is her testimony in here that I have right here. She had sworn testimony that she said that in the testimony, in the trial transcripts, she stated that the child is being sexually abused, my daughter, and she believes that by her behavior and play therapy and all of her diagnosis and this is what she specializes in her expertise, and she said that the perpetrator is the father. Visitations were reinstated, regardless. I filed a writ of mandamus to the Court of Civil Appeals. They did an emergency stay, so visitations were not reinstated at that point, until the Court of Civil Appeals then denied it 30 days later. A guardian ad litem had been appointed by a judge. And so the guardian ad litem happened to have been friends with my ex-husband. This is a small town. He's from there. I'm not. He knew everybody. He had many, many friends. He networked there, almost as if he was planning for this day to come, you know, for him to be caught. It was just, from what I was told by later on, a couple years later, by a sheriff's deputy. At that time, they took my daughter. After about a month or so, after visitations were reinstated, my daughter was telling me that her father was, at the visitation, she would come home lifeless. I mean, just totally lifeless. And she told me, you know, just in certain, she had a thing of bubbles in her hand, and she said, Daddy sprayed on the window in the car. He had 3 hours of visitation, non-supervised. And she said he sprayed on the car, naked, on the window. And that he was trying to erase her strawberry. She has a strawberry birthmark on her stomach. He was trying to erase her, I called it a beauty mark. He was trying to erase her beauty mark And I thought, child pornography, he must have pictures that he's worried that somebody's going to see. Because I had previous signs of that as well, which drew red flags for that for me too during the time, because he got his computers and did away with those, and I'd already been to the FBI last summer to try to report it, you know, my suspicions of that. So when he tried to erase her beauty mark on her stomach, that really drew a red flag for me. And that just it drew a panic. It was just, and that at that point, I had just didn't know what to do. There's local services. Nobody was going to do anything to help her. Later, about maybe, I called at that point after the visitation, I called Flowers Hospital again, and I said, what do I do? Do I need to bring her in? I said, what should I do? I got their directive, and they said, bring her in. He says, everybody does this. You just bring her in. It's better to be, you know, safe than sorry. So bring her in and we'll have her checked, because, you know, she was saying that she had been, you know, hurt. And she was gagging on water. She was just gagging. Every time she would drink a drink of water, she would gag. So I would take her, I took her to the Flowers Hospital, and she had a DNA rape kit taken of her, and they were going to send it to the Forensic Science Lab in Montgomery. Later on, I find out that that never made it to the Forensic Science Lab, and that it was missing. The evidence was missing from Flowers Hospital. Nobody knew where it was. I have information here showing that as well, where the court, 3 months after this rape kit had been created, he's asking DHR if they have possession of a rape kit to please hand it over. That's how serious this became. It was not serious at all. Tampering with evidence was just not serious. That could have saved my daughter's life. And what was in that rape kit that they did turn in later, about 3.5 months later, which was a fake rape kit, it didn't have even what was in it when I was in there that I saw that they were putting in it. So then probably after 1 week after I took my daughter to that exam, which was on April 14th, 2007, DHR, I gave Shelby, she had to go with her father for a visitation, and I never saw her after that. They took her and put her into foster care. They celebrated her birthday with DHR, my ex-husband's family, the guardian ad litem. The social worker, I found out later, was sleeping with my ex-husband, and the neighbor who initialized this was his neighbor, lived across the street. Was the social worker that helped him plan this, to have my daughter put into foster care. So they celebrated her birthday on April 14th, 2007, for her to remember that she went into foster care, you know, on her next birthday. You know, it was horrible. She went into foster care, and she had dissociative problems, behavior problems that way, dissociative. She was in there for 4 long months. And during that time, since the father was sleeping with the foster care social worker, having sleepovers with Daddy, according to my daughter, and we had a witness testify in court that they saw them together kissing by the car. They testified at the divorce trial. She was actually sneaking her from the foster parents to taking her to her perpetrator, forcing her to be with the perpetrator and seeing him. During this, he showed up at a DHR family picnic, or DHR employee picnic with my daughter. This is all during a court-ordered foster care placement. And the list goes on with that. My daughter also has a history of yeast infections, urinary tract infections, you know, many things throughout history, even when he was living with us, all that history. At that point in time, we had a divorce trial, which was on July 31st, 2007. It was supposed to be the only divorce trial. When we had, at that point, custody was given to both of us, joint legal custody, and my daughter, also, I'm sorry, let me back up. I appealed the foster care placement, the dependency. I appealed it to the Court of Civil Appeals. They denied it. I appealed it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court requested for the judge to to sign a brief, to make a brief. They wanted to know why she was in foster care. There was no reason for her to be there. And his answer were lies, of course, but then on top of that he mentioned, which is Judge Jeff Kelly at that time, then he mentioned that during the divorce trial, they will resolve it. They couldn't find, they looked and looked for anything they could use against me. There was nothing. I had no skeletons in my closet. I was a fit parent. I took my daughter to the dentist, to the doctor, you name it. I was a very good parent, loving mother, and they couldn't find her to stay in dependency. So they said that's over, that trial's over with, and we were given joint physical and joint legal custody. I wasn't allowed to mention sexual abuse. I wasn't allowed to mention anything during that time, in that trial. When that happened, then the guardian ad litem requested that, he said DHR was not able to testify at that trial, which was his witnesses, which I have read that's not even a necessity for them to be, they're not supposed to. But anyway, they made another trial to continue the trial for November 13th, 2007. So at this point, I've got two attorneys. Actually, I have three attorneys, because the first attorney, I wasn't sure what was happening. The second attorney I got him too, and I also had the dependency attorney, which was an attorney in Birmingham. And I thank God for him every day, because I had him, I paid for him to be at every trial to witness what was happening in the local area there, because I didn't know what unethical problem was going to occur. So I had him as my witness, and that was unbelievable that I did that. I'm so glad I did that. And to back up a little bit about that part right there, about the dependency trial, my attorneys disappeared. There was nobody in the local area that were there when I had to go to a dependency trial 48 hours later, not 72 hours later, which was, they took her on a Saturday, and then I had to be at court on Monday. And there was nobody to go with me. And my dad called the FBI. This was in April 14th, 2007. My dad called the FBI and told him that my daughter's been, legally kidnapped, illegally, or however you want to put it. And he says, do not let your daughter go in that courtroom without an attorney. Whatever you do, do not let her go in that courtroom without anybody. And I had prior gone to see Raymond Johnson in Birmingham, who was a civil rights attorney. I wanted to file a lawsuit against Kirk Adams in Dale County for not investigating this and refusing to investigate. And I called him Sunday night, and he said he'll be there. And he was there Monday morning. When he walked into that courtroom, there were 5 sheriffs sitting in there waiting for me, probably to arrest me for whatever reasons. I have no idea. I had no idea why they took her. And Raymond Johnson walked in, and mouths dropped. I mean, he shocked everybody. And he is, you could hear people whispering in the hallway, they shouldn't have an attorney as of last night. And I had a friend that was sitting in the hallway and heard these little remarks. And the one other police, before my attorney walks in, he said, we're going to have to go search your house. We'll be searching her house in just a little while. So that confirmed to me what their plan was. But after my attorney walked in there, they slowly slipped out the back door, and they were gone. Nothing was ever mentioned about me being arrested or anything. So that saved my life. This man saved my life, really. And he saved my life throughout the rest of the time. And, just by being there, present. He was a former U.S. attorney out of Birmingham. Okay, I'll go forward again for where I left off. That was a big part I didn't want to leave out. Where did I leave off there? Okay, so...
you talk about the continued trial.
The trial was continued, okay. And then my daughter, at that time, we had a transition from her going out of foster care into my home and then back into his home. I don't know why they did that. Long story short, she visited him, and she came back with a horrible yeast infection and urinary tract infection. my daughter, I used to work at the travel agency in Dothan, Alabama, and I took my daughter on my days I had her, because we split custody. So I take her to preschool, and she disclosed to her preschool teacher what had happened. And her preschool teacher reported it, which I didn't even know until probably a week later or 2 weeks later, something like that. My daughter was screaming at every exchange still to go back to their house, and it was, you just knew what was happening. It was devastating for the both of us. It was very traumatic. At one point, he grabbed her from me at one point, and he put his hand under her dress so I could see it. No, and I couldn't do anything about it, but it was torture for me. Absolute torture. That's how arrogant, and he was so invincible. He knew somehow there must have been money involved at that point in time. I already guessed it. Something happened there he knew of. The father of my child, his name is Martin Connolly. I call him Marty Connolly. He resides in Level Plains, Alabama. His mother is Shirley Connolly, and she is conspiring with him. I think they both do child pornography together with her, because my daughter always says to the doctors that her grandmother's present at points in time when her father's hurting her. I don't know if she's taking pictures at that time. I can't even fathom what that's all about. But I believe my daughter, and that is, she's told the psychologist. So I believe they've had incest in their family growing up. Something has to be there. So the preschool teacher reported this to DHR, and she reported this to law enforcement in Dale County. Nobody did a thing. Nobody ever even investigated it. My ex-husband still at this point has never been questioned by a law enforcement officer, to this day actually, and we're in 2012 at this time. So the preschool teacher said that she had never even heard, she said it was the hardest thing to do to report this. Nobody even wanted to hear about it. And it was really difficult for her. She was never seen a case like this before. For that, then my daughter was taken back over to her father, even though this report came in, and he still had his visitation, and he punished her for telling the preschool teacher. He left her in the house at 4 years old by herself, while he was outside in the shop all day without eating, lunch, breakfast, and dinner. And she said she went to the potty in the living room, on the floor. I mean, the list goes on. I called the Attorney General's office immediately. I didn't know what else to do. I'd followed correct protocol. Each time I followed correct protocol, which has caused a huge retaliation against me, from the state DHR office, Paige Wally, former director, to former Troy King, Attorney General, and his constituents. I have gone through every one of them, and they have retaliation has been huge in my situation, and which has been a very big factor in why this illegal abuse has continued on. So then the Attorney General's office, I spoke to the investigator there named Brooke Walker. Her name is Agent Brooke Walker at that time, and she worked for the investigations department at the Attorney General's office. And she said I should go ahead and give her all the documentation. She requested everything from me. So I went ahead and I gave her everything. Everything she wanted, and she requested a videotape or an audio tape of my daughter's disclosures that I told her that somebody had advised me to create. So she wanted to have that. She requested everything. And when I did that, she's been communicating at the same time with Janet Strickland, who is the DHR social worker sleeping with my ex-husband, without my knowledge. So everything that she told me to give her, and I have everything in writing, that she has said to request, she wanted everything. I was entrapped. I gave them everything. She then gave the videotape, or the audio tape, I'm sorry, to Troy King, because I know my friend who had lunch with Troy King to find out about, later on, about getting this case resolved, having him reinvestigate, and he told her, so that's how I knew that. I didn't know it at the time.